Hey guys, GHAZZY TV here with another Diablo 4 video. We just finished watching the dev stream for Season of Blood Season 2 Diablo 4, and I made some notes covering some stuff that I would like to tackle based on what we've heard. Now, I've talked about this in the past with how the expectation based on previous iterations and introductions of what they've done to the game has led at least me and many others to not really be that excited, and our expectations were very low. Because we've been very excited and had a certain expectation, and the delivery has been very low in comparison. Now my expectations were very low, and the changes that they've done are actually, in my opinion, on the bar on the winning side of this. So it is sounding very promising. Now I am confident that in X amount of seasons or X amount of years from now, that this game will actually be in a very good state. I've been very concerned that this is going to take longer than I was hoping for, but the things that were stated in this dev stream that they had, obviously we'll have to test it out to verify how good of an impact these things will have, but the things that they've stated is, in my opinion, very promising, making me feel, at least personally, that the game is heading in a very good direction to cater to the kind of gameplay loop, if you will, that I would like to see from the game personally. Obviously very biased. So to tackle a couple of these things, I made a couple of notes. So I'm just gonna talk about like each of these notes step by step by doing it this way. So one of the first steps is the not showing spoilers, but they can show some hype without spoiling. So what this note is referring to is the big thing that separates a big company like Activision Blizzard when hyping up a dev stream and showcasing their seasonal content to the community. It has been slightly improved in the way they were doing it when it comes to production value. But in many cases, it just feels like we're just looking at a stale image, or we're looking at a 30 FPS stuttering little footage of something that just feels kind of so after you watched it 50 times in a row whilst they're talking about it. And one of the things I'm referring to mostly when it comes to this is actually the problem that they were talking about new monsters. And all we saw was just the model of the monster being shown on screen and rotating around for us. And then they were talking about how cool the abilities that they were having was. And I just don't understand why a company this big wouldn't invest the time and effort to showcase how those things were when they talk about it. Because that would make me feel like, whoa, oh, it looks like this. That's cool. That's hyping me up. And that just didn't exist. And that's just really frustrating from my perspective that those things aren't happening from a company of that size. So that's one of the things I wanted to bring up real quick to talk about. Another thing was the season mechanic. I'm going to try to power through these notes real quick to avoid extending this video too long. They talked about vampiric powers and with the packed cost to activate via gear. So basically you could get these items or currency items, if you will, that you could apply on your gear up to a cap. I saw in the video they were showing a 4 out of 4 on a pair of pants that you can apply these packed powers on, which will then be the type of juice that you would need to activate the set amount of vampiric powers. This means that obviously the season mechanic, which has 22 vampiric powers, is obviously providing a limited amount of scaling efficiency for your character. I'll be honest, I wasn't really too excited about the season mechanic based on what we saw. I think it could be fun to play around with, but I was more excited about the generic base game changes than I was with the season mechanic. But I didn't want to mention this in the list. Another thing that I made as a note was that the display things in game, like the new abilities rather than standard model, which is what I just talked about, is going combined with the idea of not showing spoilers, because they decided not to show certain things because it would be spoilers of, you know, boss fight mechanics and whatnot. I just feel like there are ways to showcase these things to make them in a hype up situation rather than a spoiler situation. And I think that GGG and Path of Exodus does in a very good way. You know, they introduce a new boss, for example. They would showcase some of those stuffs, and people would experience and watch this and feel excited and be very, very interested and hyped up about it. And I just didn't feel like I get that from some of the stuff that Activision Blizzard is doing with these reveals. Something that they did that was really cool was incentivizing features for endgame content, and that is that the new bosses is incentivizing us to not just keep playing and progressing the character, but most importantly, incentivizing us to engage with different endgame content that was previously completely ignored. You reach an endgame state, World Tier 4, you started spamming Nightmare Dungeons, okay, you're not bit scared, you'll run some Hell Tides for the materials, and that's about it. And then you just did Uber Lilith and the Nightmare Dungeon Tier 100, which has been made easier than ever, both of which have been made easier than ever, so you don't even need a level 100 min-max character to pull that off. Some of the other things that they managed to do with this is the addition of new endgame content, which I'll talk about a little bit more in detail in a moment. But before that, I do want to say that one of the Uber bosses, which is Duriel from Diablo 2, has been made so that they have a reasonable drop chance. How high that is, I don't know, but they said that there's a reasonable drop chance for you to actually farm this boss and new uniques as well. And this allows us to actually have an in-game aspirational chase content for people to engage with. And they also said that the showcase of these bosses were actually much better than the other parts that we talked about before, because they did showcase them, how they look when you first engage with them, which gave me that hyped up, exciting feeling when we first saw them. I do like the idea that you're able to farm these things. So something to keep in mind is that this Uber boss that can drop the Uber uniques is Duriel, King of Maggots. And you only get to engage this by basically gathering fragments, similar to what we have in PoE, for example, where you gather different fragments. When you have all of the items that you require to summon or engage with this boss, you can. And they also made the decision to make Duriel slightly easier than the Uber Lilith fight, simply because of the fact that you can't endlessly just go in and engage with her. You actually have to farm or purchase the items required to actually even open up the possibility of engaging her or him. I think that's really cool. They also mentioned that the possibility of dropping new mounts from each of the new boss. I think that's a nice little note there. I don't want to dig in too much of it, but people like farming mounts, and that's a new addition for that. They had an incenses, which was barely used in the past, which are basically group bonuses. You pop them and you get a bonus to you and your party members. They will now persist through death, and they will also boost experience gain, making that an interesting and attractive feature that you want to go for if you want to maximize the amount of experience that you get from your time invested into the game. They've also made it so that experience bonuses are now multiplicative with a world tier bonus. This allows us to have a much faster increase of a higher percent gain of experience, which is now going to stack multiplicatively with the world bonuses, allowing you to have a more of a better sense of you increasing the progression that you're doing. They did mention numbers saying that's about 40% faster leveling to 100, which is going to make more people reach 100. I think that that is a really good change, but I also think that combined with the incentivizing features and changes that they've talked about is making people more interested in actually bothering to go to 100 as well. Another part they mentioned was that they talked about open world scaling, something that a lot of people have expressed concerns about, and that is that the open world scaling is the monsters are literally your level, and this is now capped in World Tier 3 to level 55. So any level above 55, the monsters will remain at 55 and you can be higher level, giving you the sense of progression that you are becoming stronger and the enemies are not scaling with you, so that you actually scale above them, and therefore not creating this catch-up mechanic. Every time you level, you now have to try to catch up to the increased powers of the enemies. And in World Tier 4, World Tier, that would be level 75 in the open world. I don't know how this is going to reflect in the Hell Tide approaches. They didn't mention that specifically, if I recall. But I do like this change because it does give you the idea that when you level up, you're actually going to become stronger as you progress in the game, and actually will be feeling this rather than playing catch up and you have to level your glyphs or you have to get better gear to get this feeling as the monsters were on your level. Something that I didn't like though was the additional character slots. Now you can create 10 characters in the game. They're giving us 2 additional character slots now, and I'm not too happy about this. Obviously, I think that most people playing the game won't ever use 12 character slots, but I think for people that do blast this game and play a lot, that want to play a lot of different classes and or having mules, are going to be very limited by only having 2 additional character slots. I think that this feels kind of stupid. I don't understand why they would limit this, or at least give us the possibility to purchase more slots for those people that want that. But I don't want to dig too much time into that. Something about the mounts that they changed, which is a good change. that I did not change the level of the win or lose bar I have here, is that they are making changes to mount speed so that it will last longer, and they've made some cooldown reductions on mounting as well to make it a little bit more comfortable. I feel like these are quality of life changes that should have been in the game from the get-go, especially the part where the mount boost speed you can do the spur will now break through barricades, which has been one of the most annoying freaking features in the game ever. And I think that that should have been in the game from the start. And a lot of people were praising them, saying, oh, this is such a great change. I feel like this shouldn't have been a problem from the get-go. And so therefore, I'm just going to say that they are fixing this. I don't want to give them praise for fixing it because it shouldn't have been an issue to begin with. But now it's getting resolved. So I guess that's a good win, I guess. CD mount reduced. Another thing that is also in the category of quality of life, there's a lot of those things in here, which I don't want to give them too much praise for, because these are things that should have been sorted from the very beginning, in my opinion. That is that when you're teleporting to a nightmare dungeon, you would be teleported outside the dungeon, then you had to enter the dungeon, causing 2 loading screens. Now the changes to this is that when you do teleport to a nightmare dungeon, you are actually teleported directly inside of the dungeon. So that's a nice little quality of life change that should have been there from the start. Another thing that I think was... I want to say this should have been in the start. I just feel like this is something that would have been able to be picked up if the game was tested properly, which I think we all can agree that it wasn't. And that is that crowd controlling effects from traps, but most importantly from enemies such as Frozen Thunder Fear, as a few examples, is now significantly lowered duration on the player. How much this is or how this will feel, we'll have to test that out in Season 2, but the fact that they are amending and sorting this big issue where you can literally be crowd controlled from, endlessly is going to be solved to some degree. And how big of an impact it will have, impossible to say, but at least they are attending to it. They also, together with the experience changes, have now increased the experience you get to glyphs so that they will level faster. The only problem I have with that specific statement is that we have the availability to level glyphs to 21. And when you do your first couple of nightmare dungeons, you get more experience than is required to level a glyph from level 1 to a couple of levels in, and now that will be even more. I just failed to see what the purpose is to have a level 2 or level 3 glyph when the first nightmare dungeon you do is going to bring the glyph from level 1 to, say, 5, 6, 7 instead. It just makes it feel kind of redundant to even bother having the early increment levels. I feel like maybe they could have been designed in a better way where when you level the glyph up, that will actually have a proper impact, because now you'll do a nightmare dungeon, you click the experience on the glyph, and it will level up several times over, and they're going to make that even bigger now. It just feels awkward. But I guess it goes to summarize what the change will mean is that it will just go hand in hand with the idea that your character is going to level faster, therefore your glyphs are going to level faster as well, to decrease the nuisances of the leveling progression, which I guess is a good thing. Another thing that I'm not confident is a good thing, but I am confident is considered a good thing for most people, that I'd like to hear your opinions on, so leave a comment down below once you've watched this video. That is that the Nightmare Dungeon's objectives is now taken away, which creates a scenario where you are incentivized to literally just rush the boss. Is this a good or a bad change? I'm not sure. I think that for most people, I would consider this a good change. You pop a Nightmare Dungeon, you bum rush the boss, you're done. There is no longer a requirement for you to pick up a key or a stone. They have to run to a pedestal to get the transmission area, to then go to the second half of the dungeon, to then go to the boss. Now you're basically able to go to the transmission area, go to the next area as part of the dungeon, and then do the boss. The problem with this is that every Nightmare Dungeon is going to be you just rushing the boss. There's no differences between the dungeons, which I think can be very repetitive and feel very Greater Rift-ish from Diablo 3. I think that's the risk that run into this. I'm not a big fan of this because I like being presented with dungeons that I have to do where there are different things that I have to engage with than just bum rushing, beeline to the boss and be done with it. Is this a good change or a bad thing? I think that most people would say it's good, but I wanted to have this discussion because I think that it could be creating a scenario where the Nightmare Dungeons running becomes rather dull because of a change like this. But again, I'm open to hear you guys' opinions on this rather than, oh, I think it's good, you're just talking shit. I'd like to hear your actual opinions on it, so do let me know in the comments below. They made some changes to world events, where world events have reduced cooldown to have them happen way more often, increased the warning timer to inform players. This goes in hand with Legion events, but also world bosses. Instead of a 6-hour cooldown spawn timer, they're down to 3.5 hour, and the warning time to tell people that this is about to happen happens much sooner. I believe the bosses was 60 minutes before, and then 15 minutes before spawn, people would be informed of this. So I guess those are good changes. I like the idea of this. It allows people to have a more windows of engaging with the boss, especially for the casual players working a 9-to-5 job. They might only have a couple of hours tops to play, and if that's not within the time frame where a world boss spawn, they're gonna miss that. So I think this is a good change overall. How much of an impact it will have, I don't really know. We'll see. I still think it's a good change overall for most players in the player base. What they've also done together with these things is Whispers and Health Ties have improved reward structure in terms of giving you better item level or item power from the items drops, but also increases the experience that you get from running and finishing Whispers at or Health Tides, which again emphasizes on the idea that you are now incentivized to engage with these mechanics other than just getting to World Tier 4, do some Health Tides for the materials, and then sit in Nightmare Dungeons all day. You are now incentivized to actually engage with these things, and there are other features that does this, which I'll talk about a little bit more in depth soon. Another quality of life addition that they've done was the search bar in the stash, plus some other quality of life things like streamer mode to hide personal information or battle tag, auto run feature for your character, minimap zoom, which is still not an overlay, still in the corner, but you can zoom that in a better way. So maybe that will create the scenario where you don't have to tab the fucking button all the time to see the map, to see where you're going, because the minimap will hopefully be zoomed out enough for you to see where you're going. So we'll see how that goes. Also, the gem changes is coming, which means that we're no longer going to take stash space with these. You get gem shards instead, and when you want to make a gem, you can do so at the jewelers instead. So all of these are just quality of life changes. I don't want to spend too much time on those either, but they're coming. Another thing that I'm not too excited about is that they said that the enchantment cost has been reworked, and I don't feel like it has. The changes that they've done is not a mechanical change. It's basically just reducing the overall increase of cost for re-rolling modifiers on your gear. The initial cost is now higher because of this on the first one that you do, but the progression cost is going to go up much more slowly. Now, how much that is, I have no idea. So they basically said that you're not going to start spending millions very quickly after re-rolling a couple of times, but you'll eventually reach that point if you re-roll too many times, I guess. How big of an impact this change will have, I don't know if it's going to be enough. I don't like the fact that it still increases to the point where there's no cap on it. I think that's the biggest problem with it personally, but it's a step in a decent direction, I guess. Another thing that they've done, which is kind of cool, is that they've increased the item power potential of Sacred Ancestral items versus higher level monsters. The item power cap is now up to 920, which means that the baseline defenses such as armor is drastically going to be increased through it getting up to a 920 cap. It also means a lot for weapons, which means that just because of this change alone, weapons going to 920 is going to be stupidly good compared to what we have access to right now because of how the scaling works. But most importantly, what they've done is that Sacred Ancestral items, the item power is going to have a minimum item power is going to be increased depending on the monster level. So if you're doing a higher tier Nightmare Dungeon, for example, it will increase the minimum item power that these items will drop at, which allows you to have a higher probability of reaching these really good item power items, which in turn incentivizes players to engage with harder content because you will have a higher chance of dropping these bigger items simply because of this little feature. And I think this is a really good step in the right direction in terms of gear progression and allowing you to be in a possibility where you don't get a high probability of getting your best items when you're level 60, 70, 80 that you will keep all the way to 100 and never change. So I think this is a really cool change in that direction. Another thing that happened is that Diablo 4 is actually coming to Steam. If you want to play on Steam, you'll have to buy the game again. And this allows you to play it on Steam Deck, for example, and whatnot. They've already done this with Overwatch. They've done this with Call of Duty. And now Diablo 4 is going to be a possible game to purchase on Steam. So I guess that's a good thing for those of you who gives a shit about that. They've also introduced 12 new uniques that is confirmed for Season 2. I'm not sure if that's going to change, but that's what they said in the dev stream. So we're going to have 12 uniques confirmed for Season 2. That's pretty cool. Uber Duriel, like I mentioned earlier, is going to be designed to be less difficult compared to Lilith due to requiring fragments to engage with, unlike Lilith. And most importantly, this is the boss that's going to give you the possibility of actually farming Uber unique items. So I'm actually very excited about this personally because it allows me to play the game in a way where there is aspirational endgame content for me to engage with. And that's basically the biggest notes that I took out from the current dev stream. They also confirmed that patch notes will be available on the campfire chat, which they'll do on the 10th. And they also will go through class changes and updates, as well as resistances, which has big changes coming, item changes with unique and legendaries, and bucket changes for the sake of damage calculations going to be altered as well. And of course, like I mentioned, patch notes. The only thing I was talking about when it comes to this dev stream we just watched is that they had an image that said Vershan, and I'm pretty sure that it's not Vershan. I'm pretty sure his name is Varshan, but I might be wrong. So that might be a little spelling error. I'm just saying, I don't know. I thought it was with an A. But like I mentioned, I think the biggest part of the replayability and the endgame content for aspirational game chasers or blasters is the fact that with higher item power means better access to base defenses like armor, and most importantly, damage from weapons, which allows us to now have an even better step in terms of gear progression for the endgame, which has been one of the big lack of content that we've been able to engage with. So this little image here is basically the type of content progression that you can go through, and I think level 1 to 50 has always remained a really good area or time frame and gameplay enjoyment that you get out of Diablo 4, which is why it's such a good game for casual players. And as soon as you're done with this first step and you go into level 50 plus, that's where the game really starts lacking in terms of content that you can do, and enjoyment and retention drops down very heavily after you go past level 50 point or even after you've done the campaign. So what they're doing now is that they're allowing you to incentivize the idea of running Whispers by increasing the reward structure of it, increasing the experience structure of it, and then that allows you to get pieces that allows you to engage with echoes of Varshan. I'm pretty sure it's Varshan, which allows you to then get pieces that will allow you to engage with Duriel later. And the same thing with Helltides or improved incentivizing features, such as there, you'll be able to get pieces that allows you to engage with Grigor, the Galvanic Saint, which is a lightning-themed boss. So there's, again, another feature that allows you to be incentivized to not just run Nightmare Dungeons to level up your glyphs, but you're now incentivized to engage with the Whispers, which I personally completely ignored. It was a complete waste of time to engage with. And Helltide was only there for materials that I could use to upgrade my gear. Now, the presentation of the content progression that you have in World Tier 3 is that Whispers and Helltide allows you to do much more and engage with more endgame related content if I choose to engage with those contents. And then in World Tier 4, this accelerates even further because now the Echoes of Varshan and Grigor allows you to get the pieces that is required to summon or engage with the Duriel King of Maggots fight. And if you do in the higher tier Nightmare Dungeons, you have access to pieces that allows you to engage with the Beast in the Ice, which is another one of these endgame bosses. And World Bosses and Legion events will give you access to engage with Lord Seer, which is the seasonal mechanic of Season of Blood. This basically what it does is presenting you with more options than to just place your home inside Nightmare Dungeons and just spam that over and over and over again, and now incentivizes you to actually engage with all of these endgame mechanics in a way where the reward structure and experience gain is made in a more attractive manner that presents you with the option to play the game across the board rather than just narrowing it down to this is the most effective, because now we have the possibility that, hey, I want to farm Duriel, which is something I definitely want to do, then I will have to engage with all of these mechanics. I have to do NMDs to get my farming items, for example, but most importantly, my glyph levels. And then if I do Whispers at the same time, and I do some Helltides at the same time, I can get these pieces to engage with these bosses, as well as Beasts in the Ice, and then fight Duriel. I can do some Legion events, and as well as World Bosses to get to Lord Seer. It just presents you with a much wider option of gameplay engagement that I can play, and I think that's really, really good. They also talked about renown changes to alleviate the pressure on having renown be done in every new character. So there's some more quality of life features on that as well. So I think that all in all, I don't want to talk too much about quality of life features because a lot of those things I feel like should have been in the game from the start, but there's a lot of that coming. But most importantly for me, from my perspective, when it comes to the fact that I believe that D4 is heading in the right direction, mostly comes from this image presenting you with incentivizing features that allows you to feel like you're actually playing the game across the board rather than just doing Nightmare Dungeons, which presents you with a gear progression past level 70, so that once I get level 100, there's a reason for that, instead of just powering through because I can already defeat everything in the end game when I'm level 80 or something. And with these features, it allows me to feel like, hey, there's actually a possibility for me to find upgrades, and I can try farm some Uber uniques with this new set of content progression. I'm not saying that D4 went from D4 bad to D4 good, but definitely in the step of the right direction to get to the point of being good. So I'm very excited for that personally. Again, a little careful, optimistic when it comes to these things, but the things that have been stated is looking promising. That's my take on the dev stream, a little TLDR video for you guys. Again, let me know in the comments below what you guys thought of it, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe for more content. Until then, stay safe, keep rocking.